Right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. In this lecture video, I'm going to discuss on chapter 9, which is on strategy review, evaluation and control. As we all know that this element of control, strategic control, is the last element in the process of strategic management. We have already discussed previously on the element of strategic formulation, in which we discussed on the importance of SWOT and conducting the internal and external evaluation. And then we have also discussed on the potential strategies that we can implement based on our analysis of the SWOT matrix. And then we discuss on relevant issues pertaining to the issues of implementation, in which we have discussed issues regarding the basic managerial functions like in the management, HR, information system, production, accounting and finance, and marketing related to the implementation of any given or any chosen strategy. And in this chapter, we discuss on the element of evaluation and control, strategic evaluation and control. And these are the elements that we are going to discuss throughout the chapter. So we go into the nature and of strategic evaluation. It involves three basic activities. Number one, you need to examine the underlying basis of a firm's strategy. And then number two, it involves comparing expected results with the actual results. And number three, taking corrective actions to ensure that performance conforms to plans. So when we talk about strategic evaluation, it is pretty much kind of like similar with performance appraisal, in which before you can evaluate a particular performance or before you can evaluate a particular achievement, number one, you need to examine the underlying basis of a firm's strategy, in terms of what involved, in terms of their SWOT, in terms of their internal factor evaluation, in terms of their external factor evaluation, and then only you can start to compare the expected results with the actual results. And usually there would be deviations. Deviations meaning that there would be some differences, julat, in terms of what you actually perform and with your intended target. For example, like this year, there would be a lot of deviation in terms of our KPIs. At the beginning of the year, we have outlined many KPIs for the universities to fulfill, but because of the current situation, and then of course we are not able to fulfill all of those. So those are the things that we talk about deviations, the difference between what you have planned and what you have actually achieved. And then that involves the next step, which is on taking corrective actions to ensure that performance conforms to plans. So there is a particular nature of strategic evaluation that has been used throughout the industry. And this nature of strategic evaluation is based on Rumelt's criteria for evaluating strategy. And this is actually one of the famous question for this particular chapter in the final exam. So the criteria being introduced by Rumelt involve four different components. Number one, consonance. Number two, advantage. And this is based on the external environment, external assessment. And then number three, consistency and feasibility are basically on the internal assessment. So let us look into the criteria. So when we talk about consistency, a particular strategy should not present inconsistent goals and policies, meaning to say that the consistency element involves evaluating how much your goals and policy match with your strategy. So there must be a perfect match. If there is a conflict between your goals and policy towards your strategy, so there is an element of inconsistency. And then number two, we talk about consonance. This is an external factor. So consonance refers to the need for strategies to examine the set of trends as well as individual trends in evaluating strategy. So if you were about to evaluate a particular strategy, you need to look at whether or not that particular strategy is compatible with the existing trend out there. What is the current trend out there? So if your strategy match with the set of trends, because we know that the trends are keep on changing. So whatever strategies that you choose in your organization, it must at least align with whatever strategies that is being focused on in the market. And then feasibility, meaning to say that your strategy must neither overtax available resources nor create unsolvable sub-problems. Or in a simpler terms, your strategy must not overuse your existing resources, nor does it create any additional issues within your organization. So it must be doable within your existing strategy or within your existing resources. It does not create additional or unnecessary stress to your workforce or within your organization. And finally, your strategy must provide for criterion and or maintenance of a competitive advantage in a selected area or of activities. So this is an external environment, the external factor. Your strategy must have or must be able to create or maintain a competitive advantage. For example, like cendol kampung ulu lah. And whatever strategy dia buat dengan adanya kedai baru, kedai lebih besar, for example, and dia boleh create that competitive advantage. That ambience, that environment, that is considered as a competitive advantage for cendol kampung ulu. So these are the four important criteria that organization can use in order to evaluate a particular strategy. Okay, now we look at why strategic evaluation is more difficult today, because things keep on changing. Dramatic increase in environment's complexity, increases difficulty of predicting the future with accuracy. Why? Because the technology keeps on changing. So when the technology keeps on changing, the system, the version of technology that we are currently used, and then it is going to be very, very difficult for you to predict in terms of the demographic background of your customers, because the demographic also they are keep on changing. The increasing number of variables, meaning that there are a lot more factors influencing a particular variable nowadays, and then the rapid rate of obsolescence of even the best plans, the increase in the number of both domestic and world events affecting organizations, and decreasing time span for which planning can be done with any degree of certainty. So the time span of planning also now they are a little bit shortened. So that's why the strategic evaluation need to be conducted more frequently, which will increase the difficulty level of strategy evaluation. So the next one, let us go into the process of strategy. Evaluating strategy should be initiated. Managerial questioning of expectation and assumption should trigger a review of objectives and value, and should stimulate creativity in generating alternative and formulating criteria for evaluation. So let us go into the framework. So it is much more easier for us to discuss. So number one, what we meant by reviewing underlying basis of strategy, these are all have been done. We have done the IFE, we have done the EFE, and then we have compare, revise to existing IFE metrics, and compare, revise with the EFE metrics. And then what we need to do is that, yes, we need to look into the elements of differences. Is there any differences occur between your underlying basis of strategy with your IFE as well as your EFE? And then you need to compare between your plan as well as your actual performance with your stated objective. If there is any significant differences occur, so you need to go into the step number 3, where you need to take the corrective actions. So corrective actions can be taken right after step number 1. For example, if your IFE EFE is not relevant enough to your actual performance, for example, maybe you need to make some amendments, some changes, and even prior to the actual evaluation of your performance, which is in step number 2. So sometimes when you talk about measuring organizational performance, you need to measure it over times, and then you need to compare with the firm's competitors, and sometimes you also need to compare with your industry average, so that you can identify and evaluate whether or not your performance is good, or you need to improve your existing performance. Again, the some of the problems relating to the quantitative criteria is that sometimes we tend to focus more on the annual objective rather than the long-term objective. And then different accounting methods can provide different results on many quantitative criteria. These are some of the corrective actions that can be taken by organization. Sometimes in the case study, they might ask you what are the actions that can be taken, corrective actions that can be taken, for example, and then we can take from this particular information and try to relate with our case study. Alright, balanced scorecard is another approach for strategic evaluation, in which it balances between the long-term and short-term concerns, between financial and non-financial concerns, in terms of strategic evaluation. For example, this is an example from the textbook. We have the customers, and then managers, employees, operations, and then community, business, ethics, financial. So you can see that some of these elements are financial, and some of these elements are non-financial. Some of these are internal, and some of these are external. And I have taken a few examples from the internet actually on how to conduct this balanced scorecard. For example, financial, we base on financial performance, customer satisfaction, internal process, business efficiency, and organizational capacity in terms of the knowledge and innovation. So we will continue the remaining of the slide in the next video. All right.